Well, hi there, everybody. It's Bill Whittle and the Stratosphere Lounge, episode 113. The first thing I'm going to hear in the comment section is what happened to the hair. It's been very staticky, and I had a hat day. Other than that, I'm doing fine, thanks. Just, it's what it is. It is what it is. I have to tell you, these open mic shows are always fun, and we pick whichever comments show up in the Facebook page, and I think these are some of the best we've ever taken ever. So we're going to get started pretty quick. We got, as usual, got a couple little pieces of business to do before we get rolling here. I did a little flying, and I had a chance to get a little bit of video on that, and I'll show you that in a minute. But something really interesting happened to me. I went to Arizona for the weekend. I flew the Long Easy out there. It's about 450 miles out, and back. And it's about a 3-hour trip. In the Sky Air, it was a 6-hour trip. So it was great. Had the airplane up to full power and top speed. We were consistently seeing, 175, 180 knots, which is nice. And that was great. But something really unusual happened on this flight. As you know, if you've been watching the show, I got bit. That plane bit me. Somebody had done a less than optimum job of replacing a cylinder. A manifold departed, and I had an engine failure in that airplane after about an hour, 1.2 hours, something like that. And so it took a while to get it fixed, and then after that, it was, watch this very carefully. They have personalities, airplanes, and I don't know many pilots who don't have a bonded relationship with their airplanes. I talk to mine all the time in the hangar. After a great flight, I talk to mine all the time. So, after that engine failure, we're just going around the pattern and getting to know each other and just kind of, let's make sure everything's rolling here. And then several weeks ago, I went up to Livermore, and that was a chance to put most of the ponies in there and take it up to about 2,700 RPM and keep it there. And that was an hour flight, and that was feeling pretty good. But this last trip was pretty much full cruise power all the way, and not a hiccup. All the temperatures right where they want them, all the pressures, everything was great. Now, on the way out, we hit some clear air turbulence. You've experienced this, I'm sure, in commercial aviation. You're just flying along, maybe just light chop, and all of a sudden, boom! And I hit something at 160 knots, just a shear, and I strap myself in. I mean, I ratchet myself in. I'm so tight in there. But this thing was so severe, it sent me up, and top of the headphones hit the canopies and knocked my headphones off. So I have to get a much bigger canopy for that airplane. I've been talking about doing that for a while. So it was a choppy trip both out and back. But on the way back, and this is the point I was trying to make, on the way back, the first hour was pretty good. The second hour was pretty bumpy, and the third hour was horrific. We had 30-knot winds at Van Nuys. It wasn't bad in the LA Basin, but coming into Palm Springs, it was the second worst turbulence I've ever been in. And here's the thing, slowed it way down, and slowing this airplane down to like way down is like still 120 knots. And that's kind of nice because you'd like to get through this mess of air. But we were just getting bucked around up there, and really beat up there. And it's, it's not scary. It's just, you just have to be completely focused all the time. You're just constantly watching everything. And we got pounded for at least an hour more, like probably 90 minutes. And then here's the thing that really kind of struck me. Got the plane on the ground, 30 knots wind at the airport, nice landing. Everything there was fine. I had a lot of experience landing, especially in crosswinds, in gliders with one wheel, so you can't put the wing down more than 4 or 5 degrees. Or else you bury the wing, and can't go around either. And CP Tomes up there said, Todd's canopies? Yes, I've talked to Todd. I've been to Todd in his shop in Fort Lauderdale, and Todd's going to blow the new canopy for me, which is amazing. In any event, here's the point of all this. I got out of the airplane and put it away, and actually before I put it away, it was out there on the ramp, and I took a couple selfies with it because this was the first time it was the airplane and me versus the atmosphere. It wasn't me versus the airplane. This is the first time I felt like we were like a solid team. And, I basically said, all right, sweetheart, you did a heck of a job up there. And the plane told me I did a heck of a job up there. And I said, I'm going to make you famous, baby. You're designed to be flown like a fighter. And I'm going to take you right to the limits of what you can do and no further. And I'll take good care of you and you take good care of me. And plane thought that was an awesome idea because she's built for speed and having fun without being stupid. And we both want to be in one piece for a long time. That's a discussion we had as well. So then, it was I don't know how to explain it. If you're a pilot, you might be able to get it. I don't know if this is true for even boats or anything or cars, but if you're a pilot, you'll understand this completely. After that chop and after running full throttle for 7 hours without a hiccup, the plane and I bonded. We had a bonding experience. And for the first time, really, you go through something rough and you can depend on it. It's not going to let you down. So that was groovy. I went out to see my friend Jerry Stipp, who is the subject of so many times I've told the story about him, geologist who was, feeding a family of 6 on, tenured salary and $24,000 a year or something. But he started his own carbon-14 dating, and now he's a millionaire and he's earned every penny of it. I'm going to turn the lights up just a tiny little bit here. Yeah, it's a little better. And I went out to visit him, and he's had some health problems, so I'm a little concerned about him. But it was good to see him again. I hadn't seen him in a while. So here's what I did do. Just before I went out, 2 days before I went to this long cross country out to Arizona, there was a little bit of clouds here. Now, they're not great clouds. Every time I look at or go back to Florida or anywhere east, you get these beautiful puffy cumulus clouds. And if you're going to go play in the clouds, those are the clouds you want because they've got a lot of real good vertical height and they're very defined. They're really crisp edge, blue sky, white puffy clouds. We didn't have that. We had a kind of a stratus layer, but it was worth going after. Now, the Sky Arrow, which I adore, that little airplane, I love it so much. We tried to get it up to the top of Mount Baden-Powell, which is about 9,000 feet, maybe 10,000, and we couldn't get it there. I mean, it took a half an hour to go from 8,000 feet to 9,000. It just was out of power. But this plane, I got to 10,000 feet in no time. I haven't taken it that high before. It just felt really solid, and it'll go higher. As a matter of fact, I think Burt Rutan, somebody told me that the Long Easy with a regular engine, just a regularly aspirated, non-turbocharged engine, they've taken it to 35,000 feet. Think that's the height of a 737. Oh my God! So anyway, I'm gonna mix this one down and give it some music. But I just rushed a little preview here for the Stratosphere Lounge crowd. So put a little engine sound under there because otherwise it sounds weird. I don't have any music, so I use the ambient engine sound. But it's about 3 minutes, and I probably won't play it all the way through. But this will just give you an idea of what this flying thing's all about for many of us. So let's take a look, shall we? Here we go. I don't know why it's so compressed like that. It was full screen before, but we'll just take our word for it. So we're doing a little banquet out there, and that every time you see the camera haze over like that, it's because it's picking up a little mist from the clouds. That's a pretty steep bank, it's a 60-degree bank, and we're over the Mojave Desert in uncontrolled airspace, and like I said, no nice big beautiful puffy clouds, but something, and in the desert out here in California, that's saying something. So it's nice to have 2 cameras. I expect to have 3 or 4 in the not too distant future when I get everything the way I want it, and you can see me kind of hauling around that cloud structure there. I can't tell you how much fun this is. If it looks like it's fun for you guys, being in the airplane is just spectacular. Like I said, again, real rough and ragged clouds. They're not great for flying through, but you work with what you can. And I think we kind of just nicked a little bit from it. You got a great idea for speed. By the way, we're doing like maybe 130 knots, 140. The plane will go half again faster than that, almost. And as you're about to see, it gives you a sense of perspective. There's a sense of motion and speed, and there you go. If you have a wide open sky, you just don't get any sense of that at all. Swing this baby around there and curl around. It's probably a 2.5, 3G turn coming around that cloud there like that. And it's kicking. It's kicking. I think I saved one last thing for the finale. I hope I did. I think I did. Come around. It's weird seeing the canard, by the way. It's odd flying an airplane where you can see the control surfaces in front of you because they shake a little bit in turbulence. They're supposed to. They're designed to. But it's still a little odd watching them out there. Here we go. I'll just nick an edge of this thing here, I think. There we go. There's a tiny little canyon here. Oh, you can see the shadow of the airplane on the upper right-hand corner there. That's the shadow of our own airplane coming around the curve here. And this is longer than I remembered it being. And I think I roll out and punch through just a tiny little bit of it. Yeah, let's see. Yep, I remember now. So basically, I was about to check out under the layer. I wanted to go get a look at some of the snow, but it was actually snowing over the mountains that day. So I think we just kind of nick a little edge here, and you'll see the condensation. Yeah, that's pretty thick. And we'll just roll her out and come on out of there. So yeah, that's what I do, and it's like it's just recreation. And well, there's such great comments. Brent Cake said, "America, damn right, buddy. This is America, and this is one of the things that you can do in America, and do it relatively inexpensively. If you look up Long Easy for sale on Google, just Google it. You know, you can get an airplane like that for, I got a particularly nice one, but you can get one that'll fly just fine for, $25,000, $30,000. So anyway, I had a lot of fun with that. And then 2 days later, the big Arizona trip where we got banged around, and I took good care of the plane. The plane took good care of me. And so now we were friends, but now we're old friends and we trust each other. So there we go. And hey, Thomas Hannibry said he's looking forward to glider lessons. Thanks to you this summer. You're gonna love it, pal. The 60-degree banks. I was doing those after I'd soloed. I soloed in 7 hours, and on hour number 8, I was in 60-degree banks, 2-3 knots above the stall, trying to hook a thermal, and it's great. So I'll do that. I'll do the whole video with some music, obviously, and there's takeoff and landing and all that groovy stuff. But I wanted to just show you the highlights just to let you know we're still out there flying. So there we go. All right, let's get started. Episode 113. Needless to say, the first one is the number one, upranked by more than anything I've ever seen. The questions this time are terrific. So let's get started here. Rebecca, congratulations on the pregnancy, and I'm sorry to hear that maybe you're not getting the support you want. But sometimes the most obvious things are the most important things. Sometimes the simplest things are hard to see. None of us would be here if people hadn't made that decision to have kids, to go ahead with pregnancies, it's so obvious, but no one gives it the credit that it deserves, because it is an enormous sacrifice. I mean, I don't want to make anybody laugh, or I don't want to just track me down just so they could slap my face. But just having my 8-year-old cousin out here for now, I keep calling him my cousin. I don't know why I do that. My 8-year-old nephew. Just having him out here for 3 days is, just for this bachelor, just an indication of just how much work and effort it is. I know people are going to want to come through the screen and kill me, but I say this with the utmost respect. So the question actually is from Mike J. Amadon, and I wanted to get to it first in case you have to go, and also it'll be the first one on YouTube. So it basically says from Mike J. Amadon, just one favor, Bill, both my fiancé and I are fans. Thank you. Now we are expecting our first child as well. If you could work it in, my fiancé would be thrilled to no end if you congratulate her on the baby. Her name is Rebecca. I know this is a personal one for me, but it would just make her the happiest little mommy to have one of her idols show her some support. Well, I'm very, very flattered. You're about to get a new idol, and you won't be thinking about me again at all, ever, especially considering the family's not being supportive. So look, first of all, Rebecca, congratulations. And congratulations to you too, Mike, on getting married. And that's going to be an adventure. You guys sound like terrific people. And I don't really I'm not going to stop talking about this. I'm just kind of at a loss for words here. The the This is what life is about. Everything else is secondary to this. It's the most important thing you can do. It's the most rewarding thing you can do. And I know right now in the comment stream here live, they're just nothing but congratulations, Rebecca. I mean, it's just scrolling through. And when it gets up on YouTube, this video will be seen by, I don't know, a couple thousand people. And I have no doubt that you'll get a lot of congratulations up there, too. As far as the support goes, sure would be nice. But that's what your fiancé is for, right? I mean, you don't get to pick your family, but you do get to pick your friends. And a good marriage is somebody who's your best friend and somebody who's going to take care of you. And just the fact that he wrote this email means he thinks a lot about you. And the idea that I might be of just having me say something about it might mean something to you guys is just extremely flattering to me. These are the kind of things that mean the most to me. But everybody up there right now is going, yay, Rebecca and Mike and baby, and from Cheryl Twomey and everybody else. So sincere congratulations on the pregnancy. Congratulations on the upcoming marriage, and enjoy it. It's not only the most important thing we do, it's the most rewarding and fulfilling thing we do. It's just terrific. And I don't need to get into why you're not getting the support you need from your family. And I don't need to bring up anything like that to have a damper on a good moment. So to whatever degree this means something to you, I genuinely am sincerely very, very happy for you for both the news and I wish you the very best, and let me know. Send some baby pictures, and I'd be happy to post them. We'll put them up on the Facebook page. So and as some people have said, just keep the Doritos away, right? We know what can happen there. So congratulations again, Rebecca, and you too, Mike, and thanks for that question. I love questions like this. So the congratulations keep rolling in, by the way. Moving on a little bit, we have two questions about Ted Cruz. First one's from Al Conson, and it is, if Ted Cruz asked you to help him beat the rap that he's supposedly, quote, insincere, phony, preachy, and comes across like a televangelist, how would you go about it? Well, as I've said, I think a couple times here, I have now had 4 or 5 introductions to the Cruz campaign, people who were on the inside. I wrote a proposal on this exact subject, and I'll just tell you what I told them in the proposal. I agree that's how Ted comes across, and it's heartbreaking. And it's getting to the point where people's opinions are so locked down now. But here's the point I want to make about it, Alan. I've met Ted Cruz. I met him first time 3-4 years ago, and way before people were talking about him. He'd just been elected senator, and there were mumblings about a presidential campaign, but it was years ago. And I met him backstage, and I loved him. And then we chatted a bit, and he was as nice as can be. And then he asked me to come out and introduce him at a time where I got, called for the unsolicited murder of innocent civilians. And when I talked to him about that, by the way, I said, hey, man, I hope it didn't cause you any blowback. And they said, everybody laughed. Everybody knew it was a joke. Just leave these weenies alone. Ted has used a lot of my Rebel Alliance stuff on the floor of the Senate. And not to be too graphic, but I was in a restroom in Fort Lauderdale Airport just washing up, and somebody had basically seen me come in there and just reached over and tapped me on the shoulder, and it was Ted saying hi. So what I said to the campaign was, look, what I think I could do for you is not teach Ted how to act on camera. I think what I could help you with is how to teach Ted not to act on camera, because the Ted that I know is genuinely the warmest, nicest, sweetest guy in the world. And when I first started hearing these comments and criticisms about him, I couldn't square it. I thought there must be something but he backstage is so loose and genuinely friendly. I actually thought his biggest problem as a potential candidate was that he would not be alpha enough, that he wouldn't look tough enough. I thought he was just too nice. But yeah, I just say this since I'm a fan, and he's certainly my candidate. He telegraphs a joke. You can see it coming 20 minutes before it gets there, and that's not. Don't tell a joke if you're gonna ring it out like that. And it could use a little styling here and there, but he is so. He's the real deal. He's the actual real deal. He is, Scalia said he's the smartest law clerk they ever had in the Supreme Court, and Scalia is the smartest guy who's ever been on the Supreme Court. So if he asked me, I would certainly like to help him. I've spoken to, like the campaign manager, we'll call you on Monday, and we called back a bunch and didn't get any response, so there we go. But I don't want to sound overly critical. There are things I think I could do to help him a little bit, but I certainly couldn't make him a better president. He's an incredibly gifted, smart guy who loves this Constitution, loves the country. And if he's not the nominee, I hope to God that they appoint him Attorney General, because having somebody who actually cares about justice in the Justice Department would be nice. I think on some level, I'd almost think I'd rather see him as Attorney General. Well, that's not true. But if that's a consolation prize to be handed out, and by the way, we've had this conversation before. Why don't we come out of the Republican convention with an administration? Why don't we just come out with an administration? If Trump's the nominee, then why isn't it okay? Whoever, Rubio or Carly Fiorina as the vice president. Ted Cruz will be my Attorney General. Ben Carson will be my Surgeon General. Alan West will be my Defense Secretary, and boom, off you go. You'd have a winning. Everybody would have their candidate would have a place there, and I thought it'd be great. And a second Ted Cruz question is from Trey Lyles. Said he asked this last time, but didn't get answered because of time constraints. The question is, what do you think of Glenn Beck's endorsement of Ted Cruz for president? What more could we do to assure that he's a good man for the job? I've had obviously real mixed feelings about Donald Trump. And as I said before, if all he does is destroy political correctness, then you can make a pretty good case that anything that follows after that, if you can destroy the media hold on information, and if you can just plain laugh it off and just walk in its face, then you may almost say, well, anything that follows after that was worth it, because if we can't get the arguments on the table, we can't ever win again. So that's always been my pro-Trump position. But I don't know, for a while there, Trump and his supporters, this is why I did the Trump afterburner. I mean, they're calling, he's calling National Review, losers, and dying magazine. I don't know, it may be in bad shape financially, but National Review has been fighting this fight forever. George Freeland just used the term I love. He said Trump is the SMOD. SMOD stands for SMOD, and it stands for Sweet Meteor of Death. Vote SMOD in 2016. A permanent solution to our political problems. The giant life-killing extinction event meteor, the Sweet Meteor of Death, is going to come down and solve all of our problems. But I have to tell you, what support I did have for Donald Trump as a candidate just largely evaporated at the tone. He calls Michelle Malkin a loser, and he's called Ted, I have to make up for all the profanity I put into episode 111 or whatever it was with the Holocaust denier, but he called Ted the P word. And, if you were firing just a word to Donald Trump, because undoubtedly he watches every second of the show, Donald, if you were using those kind of terms against Democrats and media, you'd have the whole country. But when you take shots at people on our team that are that mean-spirited and low, and they're very juvenile comments, and unfortunately his supporters, and I'll be one of them if he's the nominee, his supporters pick up that tone. And then, next thing you know, I'm a a cuckservative, which I guess is a conservative cuckold. I don't know what the term means. I'm a statist. I represent the status quo. I'm a rhino. I'm all these things, and so is Glenn Beck, and so is Rush Limbaugh, and so is anybody else who's had a moment's hesitation or doubt about Donald Trump. And watching the Trump supporters online just savage people who've been fighting for this cause forever. I mean, the whole Tea Party was there to stop universal single-payer health care. And with all that said, there's been a lot of the other way around, too. A lot of people have called Trump supporters insane and, well, he's not a conservative. Well, he's not. But I think Trump supporters know what he is, and I don't think they care. I think they see somebody who's, here's what they see. They see somebody who's going to smash the system up. And again, this is where I always just come back to, and why, if he's the nominee, I'll vote for him. I think Ted Cruz would do a better job of smashing the system up, and he'd do it constitutionally. But if it takes Donald Trump to smash the system up, then okay. And frankly, if I have a choice between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, I'll take Bernie. And I'll take Bernie because he's not a lying, treasonous traitor who's had, scores of people, 4 people killed for sure, and is going to cost the lives of scores of other people. He's not. If America gets socialism, let's just get it full strength. Let's just show people what it is, and show them what it is. But it's interesting, isn't it, listening to Bernie Sanders saying people are disgusted and sick and fed up, and they want to change. Isn't that what they sold us last time? Isn't that what the whole thing was about last time? Were we supposed to get hope and change? Why is everybody so angry? If the Messiah did such a job of uniting the country, why is it that the left and the right are basically saying we want nothing to do with our political parties, we want outsiders, we've had enough of this crap? So how? We know who to blame it on. It's Bush's fault, obviously. In any event, yeah. So that's my Donald Trump rant for the night. But when you're making fun of Glenn Beck and Rush and Michelle Malkin, it really, first of all, just shocked me, and secondly, it really angered me, because I don't want to put myself in their league or anything, but when you are out there in front of this with your name and your face on it, fighting for these principles, you take a lot of hits. I mean, and to get shot from the rear by your own troops is the worst thing of all. And I was appalled by it. I really was. So, yeah, there you go. So moving on. I think we got a couple from Zechariah Tiemens. It's a habit, but they're super questions. They always are. I have reverse favoritism towards the Tiemens. If it's not extraordinary, I won't take it on account of it being the Tiemens Lounge. But it's a great question. A couple others too, I think. So here's the first one. It's here's the big lie often repeated: political correctness isn't about censorship. It's about being polite and not an insensitive jerk. Since most of us actually want to be polite, how do we fight back against this meme? You have a right to be a jerk. You don't have an obligation to be a jerk. That's actually rather pithy. That's really it, right? You have when you really get right down to it, when you say something that somebody considers offensive or hateful, it is offensive or hateful to them. And it looks like I'm going to be doing more university stuff with a bodyguard, apparently. But what these people have never heard is, oh, this is hateful to me and it's offensive to me. Well, everything you believe is hateful and offensive to me. Your weakness is offensive to me. Your inability to grow up is offensive to me and offends me. It offends me that you want to steal from other people so that you can get stuff for free. That offends me. It offends me. It hurts my feelings, and it makes me feel bad. So ultimately, when you're going to talk about this business about being polite, it's a question of polite to who. You just because, like I said, you have a right to be a jerk. You don't have an obligation to be a jerk. A person who just goes poking people in the eye for no reason is not the kind of person most people associate with, and that's fine. They don't associate with them. But you have the right. And the reason you have to have the right is because there is nobody on this earth who will not be offended by something. And if everybody has to speak and think although there's a big difference, and that's why political correctness is dying. But if everybody has to speak in such a way that no one is offended, in other words, if you have to monitor everything that comes out of your mouth so that the most easily offended people amongst us aren't offended, then you don't have any speech at all, and you don't have any thinking at all. And I think it's fun to watch. I posted on Facebook a thing where Triumph, the insult comic dog, interviewed these social justice warriors. And in the Facebook post, I said, here's Triumph 10 years earlier or whatever, making much, much more fun of the nerds lined up outside of, and they called themselves nerds. They're proud of it. Outside of the, Attack of the Clones premiere. And Triumph was, him interviewing the Star Wars fans, the funniest thing I've seen on YouTube just about. But when he went after the social justice weenies, you could see it was not just that they were, none of them laughed. You could see they were uncomfortable. You could see they were offended. You could see they didn't think any of it was funny. But the most thing, if you watch the kids carefully, because watch it once for the laugh, but watch it again for the reaction. If you watch the kids, you can see the metal grinding in their head. It's like you can hear the sound of an engine that doesn't have any oil in it. It's Ripley, back off! You're just grinding metal, and that's terrifying to me. It's terrifying to me that these people are this weak. I really do have to shake myself sometimes and say they're not all like this. This is, these are kids at University of New Hampshire or whatever, and they can't process it. But here's the point. This is a much more interesting point. Watch that video again, and watch them, because in the video, if you haven't seen it, and you don't have to go see it, I'll just tell you what happens. Triumph the Insult Comic Dog is the worst rubber puppet of a dog, and because it's a rubber puppet, the guy who's the comedian behind it, and I should know his name and I don't, somebody will tell me in a moment, gets to say anything because it's the dog. And he's insulting these kids, and one of the things he does is he brings out, here's the thing. This is exactly the thing I'm gonna get to. He has, as part of this thing, arranged to have a fat black gay man come out. Do you hear what I just said? A fat black gay man come out into the classroom. And that's what the guy is. And he's cast to be that. And so Triumph says, describe this guy, and he brings out a sketch artist, and he says, describe this guy. And that's the part where it is the most interesting, because when he's asked these kids to describe this fat black gay man, watch the gears working. They know what he is. They know he's a fat black gay man, and they jump around. Robert Smigel? Yeah, anyway, he's terrific. But watch them, and watch them trying to top each other, and watch them censoring everything. So describe the man who just came in. He's somewhat, perhaps maybe just a little obese, and obese. How can you say such a hateful thing? And then the guy comes out, and it's all a gag. Anybody can see it's a gag. Anybody can see that Triumph has this fat black gay man come in specifically to pull these kids' chains, and one of them saying, well, anything else about him? Yeah, he had an odd sort of a speech affectation, which is he was just flaming. He may be an actor. Wouldn't be surprised if he was. And they were saying things like he's, as Lori just pointed out, he was a man of size. He was he was a person of size. You mean fat? And they're just jumping over these hoops in their heads, and they're terrified. And the best part is they bring the guy back out and they show him the sketch, which is all pre-done. It's all hilarious. And somebody said, was it you who said that he was large? And this kid goes, I'm sorry. He spent 20 minutes trying to find the least offensive way to say fat. And once they got him. And man, what was it? He was talking about how on the New Hampshire students want to ban the term freshman because it's offensive to people who aren't men. So they want to get rid of freshman, and they want to call it. And they want to get rid of the term freshman orientation and call it first year orient. So he says, so what would you call it? We said we want to call it first year orientation. He goes, oh, you racist. Shouldn't that be first year Asian mentation? Just genius. It's just genius. And this is where I've been saying the whole time, you got to just poke it in the eye, just go straight at it. Straight at it. It's on the Facebook page. I can't recommend it highly enough. And if you have time, watch them with the social justice warrior. I'm going to get in the habit of getting this right. These SJWs, the social justice weenies. Watch how unbelievably uptight and unfunny and miserable and unhappy they are versus what he says, which is much more insulting, I think, to Star Wars fans who are just out there dressed up and laughing at it because it's funny. It's funny. If you can laugh at yourself, you've got something going right. And it was really enlightening. So anyway, to answer your question there, Zechariah, like I said, you must have a right to be a jerk. That doesn't mean you have an obligation to be a jerk. And the answer to people who are impolite and rude is to ignore them and don't invite them to your parties. And if somebody is impolite and rude, then don't follow them on Facebook and don't watch their videos and don't watch them on TV. Because what's impolite and rude to you is just fine to somebody else, and you're depriving them of something they want to see. And what's just fine to you is impolite and rude to somebody else. And if you decide, as I said, to speak to the lowest common denominator of the priesthood of being offended, then no one gets to say anything. And I'm just not going to put up with it. So you shouldn't either. Just go right in their face. Just call them what they are. Kevin Jordan says, is hate a useful tool or is it poison? How much understanding am I supposed to throw at a subject or behavior before I throw up my arms and paint it red forever? That is a great question, and it's been something that's been bothering me a lot lately. Hang on, excuse me. We will be producing, as soon as we get the website open, which I think will be by next show, these fabulous Stratosphere Lounge cups will be available for sale. That's a question. And here's the answer. When you're dealing with progressives and all of these weenies, you'll hear them say hater. If you don't like something, you're the whole phobe word, right? Phobe actually means afraid of. I'm not afraid of homosexuals, and I am afraid of Islam. I'm afraid of it to the degree that I think it needs to be dealt with seriously. But they call you a hater. You're just filled with hate. Well, this is the important point here. First of all, if you have any kind of a moral code or core at all, there are things that you should hate. You should just murder should be something you hate. Watching guys with rifles shoot little girls in the back of a head and pushing them into a ditch. If that doesn't make you hate that person and that system, then there's something really, really wrong with you if you don't hate those people. When I see ISIS doing what it does, it makes me hate them. And when I see them innocently murdering these innocent civilians and prisoners, it makes me hate them. And when I see them in their convoys, I want to blow them up. And when guys like my friend, who shall remain nameless, but who's watching right now, is actually on the job and helping, blow them up. And apparently, I haven't gotten to see it because they had to sanitize the CENTCOM room before I went in there. And they had to sanitize it after I left, too, for different reasons. And because you can soil yourself in there. It's just so cool. Now, you've seen all the gun camera footage from, you saw the first stuff from Iraq, from Gulf War, and then from Iraq and Afghanistan. But I'm told now it's in full color HD. And I would love to see some of those videos because I hate those guys. And it would make me feel good to watch evil be destroyed. If you don't feel good watching evil be destroyed, I think there's something wrong with you. Honestly, if you didn't like watching if you didn't like watching the commandant of the camp getting hung in the camp, the German at the end of the war, what was his name? Anyway, if you don't hate injustice, then I think there's something wrong with you. But that's not really the question. That's part of the question. Yes, you should hate certain things. You should hate injustice. You should hate murder. If somebody's a rapist, you should hate that person, and hate is focused anger. Hate is focused anger. I'm not saying hate is good. I'd love to be in a world where I don't hate anything, but if you have any kind of moral code and there's any kind of injustice, major injustice, then that's worthy of hate. Hating people for their skin color or their nationality is pointless. I mean, I treat people as individuals. There are good people and bad people all around the planet, including in this country, and I tend to hate the ones that are aggressively evil, you know? And when I see people torturing animals, boy, oh boy. So the question then is, if you hate these things and you see so much of them, how do you avoid being consumed by hate? I got to tell you, I'm having a real problem with this. I'm just waking up with nightmares every day. They're not real nightmares like some of them are kind of combat nightmares and fights and that kind of thing. But a lot of them are just anxiety nightmares, and they're getting much more frequent. I mean, I wake up almost every day because in my dreams I try to solve these things. I try to fix them, and that's what I dream about. That's what all I do or read about and work about. And at nighttime I fight this fight, and a couple times I wake up like shouting. It's one of the reasons I showed you that flying video. On some level you have to kind of get away from things in order to go back to them again, and you just, I don't know. I feel like I'm so careful about these kind of comparisons out of the respect for the people that actually do this. But to the degree that it's unpleasant and to the degree that I think it's actually harmful, I have to go back out and do it because somebody has to go back out and do it. And the comparison I almost made and didn't want to make is, a lot of times soldiers don't want to, in fact, pretty much all the time, unless you're a special forces guy or something. There's a lot of times soldiers do not want to go out there and get shot at, but they go because it's their duty and they have to go. What I do is nothing like as dangerous as that and is not nearly worthy of the kind of praise and respect that those guys have earned. But on some degree, it is a little traumatic, and you have a choice. You can walk away from it and find a place like Montana where really seriously, if you just decided to leave it alone and if you didn't care about the future, you would be able to live out a perfectly happy life. Certainly I would. I'm 56. I'll be 57 in a month or two. I'm sure I could find a place out in Montana and find a way to make a living and not have it bother me. Just never turn on the TV. Who cares about what's happening in Washington? It doesn't touch you, and it will eventually touch you, but it won't touch you for a while. Or you can you can run to the sound of the rhetorical gunfire, and that's kind of what I do, because it's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it. But it's this, I'm so happy to see Hillary sliding, and I can't think of a worse person for president. So I have a fair amount of enjoyment watching her lose it, and it looks like justice is coming to her, and that's lovely. And it's not a question of Bernie Sanders. I don't hate Bernie Sanders. I don't like him. I don't think he's a nice guy. But I don't hate Bernie Sanders. I hate Hillary Clinton. I don't hate Bernie Sanders. But I am terrified of the support that he gets from young people. And it's only recently I realized, we been talking about these millennials and how weak they the ones that you see on camera. I know there's a lot of millennials watching right now, and I don't mean to include you in that and apologize. So let me just get that said. But the thing that I just really realized is how perfectly they've been bred to be socialists, how perfectly engineered they've been to become socialists. Nobody wins, nobody gets the big trophy, and nobody goes home without a trophy. So in capitalism, somebody wins because they work harder and they try harder and they're smarter and whatever the case may be. Sometimes they're luckier, but it's never just luck. And some people lose. And these people that we've raised now don't win and don't lose. Everybody's equal. Think about it. When you stop giving trophies for first place and second and third, and everybody else goes home without anything, and you replace that with every single person getting an identical participant trophy in order to not hurt anybody's feelings. I was concentrating so much on the hurt feelings and the weakness that generates in these kids. But what I hadn't fully realized until about a week ago was what perfect, absolutely perfect indoctrination that is for socialism, right? These kids have never had a chance to excel. They've never had a chance to excel. They've never been pulled back from excelling. They've never failed. They've never succeeded. They don't know the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. And so while I was concentrating on their emotional lack of development, it's only recently that I began to realize just how perfectly socialized, perfectly engineered they are to be socialists. Nobody wins, nobody loses, nobody has more than anybody else. No one's allowed to be better than anyone else. The only competition these people have is to compete to see who's the biggest victim. And finally, they can't take care of themselves. There are people who are applying for jobs they're 25 years old, and somebody says, hey, I need that report now. They go home, and the next day the boss gets a call from their mom. What's going to happen to these kids when their parents die? They want somebody to take care of them. And they don't care about freedom because they've been so free. The idea that they are socialized to not want the opportunity. They want the security. And honestly, it's terrifying. It's terrifying how and again, go back to the social justice weenies thing on that I mentioned earlier with Triumph on the Facebook page. Just look at the men. I mean, one of them is clearly gay, and that's fine. There's some gay warriors, and I have nothing against the gay thing at all. It's a question of strength that I'm really talking about. And then the rest of them, most of them are, they're 50% overweight, and all of them are just so small. I just want to ask these guys, and I probably will, I want to ask these men, what do you think about the women in this class? I mean, not individually, what do you think about women today? And ask the women, what do you think about men today? And the men are checking out. They can't be men for real, so they go to video games. Why do you think Call of Duty is so popular? Why do you think all these first-person shooters are so popular? Why do you think that every time something like Skyrim comes out or something, you sell billions of dollars of these games? It's because young men are not allowed to be men in the real world, so they just detach from the real world. They're not interested in dating anymore. These women are super, super sensitive, and they're really angry, and they don't want anything to do with it. They're just getting off the boat, and they go into their little room, and they turn on their computer, and they get to be men in Call of Duty. They get to be men for 17 hours at a stretch or whatever. And no one's really talking about that, but that's what's driving the video game thing. And there are some girl gamers too, women gamers. Otherwise, I'd be, put up against a wall. And they are also in it because they don't have a chance to compete. And no one, by the way, it's interesting, isn't it, that when you get into the world of video games, I've never really had this thought before, but when you get into the video games, there's a score, because I've done a bunch of, it's been a long time, Counter-Strike. I played Counter-Strike. I like that a lot. But everybody's ranked. There's an exact, very precise score of how many kills you got, who got the most, who got the least. Everybody did great. Both teams won. Everybody did a good job. It's rigidly competitive and extremely, extremely clear. And that's why they're so popular. And that's why especially boys retreat into video games, because they don't have a chance to have these kind of success, or they don't even have this kind of fear. They don't have this kind of stress. The most stress they get is playing a video game, and that can be stressful. By the way, I mean, if you really get into a game, then you can feel, your adrenaline gets pumping for sure. And the problem is, in a game, obviously, in a video game, if your adrenaline is pumping, you've got nowhere to put it. It just sits in your tissues, and you end up smashing the monitor. If you're out playing a game of baseball or football or whatever, you get fired up, you get adrenaline, and you get to burn it off, and that feels good. But these man children just get adrenalized, and it just sits in their tissues and destroys them. And they're unbelievably unfit. Shoulder's healing nicely, by the way, and I haven't been able to do any upper body work for a couple of weeks now, and I'm feeling it a little bit. But just before the surgery, I used to go to the gym every day. In my early 30s, I went every day. and without a trainer, and I did 5 or 6 exercises, and I did them badly, but I really worked hard. And just a day or two before the surgery, I remember I was just getting changed, and I just said, I've never been in this kind of shape before. This is the best shape I've ever been in ever. I'm pushing 60. And their lives are going to be shortened, but not just shortened. Their lives are cheapened by their inability to do anything. And by the way, it's one thing to be fat as you get older, because look, the metabolism slows down, the opportunities for exercise disappear. You have a job. Most of us, during our job, we have to sit at a desk. So, it's one thing, Eyes and Fire, the guardians of the Stratosphere Lounge with his flaming sword, just called me out for completely outing him. That's apparently his entire life. And he's told me that in person, too. He told me how, they're just automatically assume that he's a rapist, and, so, okay, fine. So we'll just go play with other. That's another term that insult uses. It said frat boys is an offensive term. Why don't we just call them rapist Americans? He just destroyed those kids. But yeah, so that's pretty much it, I guess, for that. But you're going to get what you pay for, and I don't hate these millennials. There are times when I get angry at them, but I don't hate them. It's not their fault. I hate the people that did it to them. And part of that is parents who were too overly protective, but part of it also are these socialist teachers who know better. And those people are trying to destroy this on purpose. And the reason, look, socialism is taking from people who can do things and giving it to people who can't. And the reason that these teachers have taught the socialism, and the reason that there's socialism in the first place, and the reason that anybody liked socialism or communism is it's a way for people who are too lazy or too stupid to work to steal stuff from people who do. And I hate that, because people will just stop. If they have the legal ability to take 93% of what you make through coercion, people will just stop. They'll either leave or they'll stop. I keep wondering about a Bernie presidency and how awful it would be, and then I suddenly realize, well, wait a minute, he is not actually the dictator. There is a Congress, right? Well, we haven't had a Congress for 8 years. We've had the House for 6, and we've had the Senate for, 2 now? And we've never stopped Obama, but we didn't stop Obama because he was black. I think when it comes time to stopping President Bernie Sanders, I like to think they'd have a few more votes than that, but, it's pretty scary. It's really pretty scary. Kevin Jordan asks an interesting question. I might have to do a couple of these. No, I'll get through them. I'm just going to have to hurry up. This is really interesting. Do progressives enjoy anything short of attempting to steal freedom and morality to heap into the giant broken hole that they have inside of them? I can't imagine Hillary or Barack really mining much joy out of their days. They don't seem to have many functioning relationships that don't share in tearing apart something or someone. In contrast, most of the conservatives I know jam their lives full of meaning, love, and passion. Is that one reason why they hate us? Yes, and it's one reason why they're so good at politics, because politics is their religion, it's their philosophy, and their job. It's all three. It's their religion, their philosophy, their passion, and their job. And it ties into what I said earlier. When you get right down to it, the collectivist ideal that the Democratic Party now represents is theft. They want to get free stuff, and they want other people to pay for it. And they talk about the rich and they have all this money as if the fortune fairy just flew through the kingdom one night and, alighted on certain doors and ting, you're going to be rich and the rest of you, go to hell. I know a bunch of people who are rich, and I know some people who are extremely rich, and they have worked very, very hard and changed the world for the better. And the example I'd always go to for them would be Steve Jobs, who was, by all accounts, an awful guy, and then by some accounts not nearly so awful as he's portrayed, but he's a great example of a guy with a vision that simply wouldn't let go. And he had billions of dollars, and he earned it, because without Steve Jobs, there wouldn't be one of these. There just wouldn't be. Maybe it would have eventually happened, but he made it happen. He made the technology happen. And because of his contributions that all of these kids enjoy, he got more than other people. And, is that, it always comes, look, to the point of fairness. They talk about fairness. as if wealth is just dropped from the sky like manna. Some people have more than others. Is it fair that a brain surgeon gets paid the same as a guy who smoked doobies out in back of the 7-Eleven and is a clerk at 7-Eleven? Is it fair that he should make the same amount of money as the 7-Eleven clerk, who basically partied and goofed off the whole time? Is it fair? It's not fair. There's only one form of actual fairness, and that's letting people do as much or as little as they actually want to or can. Anything else that's enforcing, equality is stripping you of freedom. And the reason that people vote for socialism is because there are more people nowadays who would rather just sit out back and smoke doobies than there are people who'd like to get ahead in their lives. And the more government benefits you provide, the easier the choice is. And look, put aside the fact that they're stealing money from those of us that produce things, and put aside all of that. Just assume for a second that it was, in fact, actually free, that you could, in fact, actually just print money. There is nothing more destructive than sitting around watching TV and getting checks for work you didn't do. It is the worst thing ever. It's soul destroying. No wonder everybody's so angry. No wonder the inner cities are so murderous. What do you do? I mean, what do you have to look forward to? The smart ones in the inner cities are drug dealers. If I was born in the inner city, I'd be a drug dealer. What else have they got? They're entrepreneurs, and they're smarter and tougher and more ruthless than the rest of the people in the neighborhood. But what about the rest of the people in the neighborhood? Why do you think they're doing drugs? Look, why are they doing drugs in the first place, right? Why do people? Forget about having a beer at the end of the day. We're talking now about people who will risk their lives to steal copper wire out of a wall and whose arms are rotting off from gangrene from shared needles, doing speedballs and stuff. Why would you do that? It's only because you're so bored. You're so impossibly bored, and you're so completely hopeless in the sense that you're not the master of your life, and you're never going to be. That life is just simply something that has to be endured until you die, and if you die of a drug overdose or die in a gang shootout, then okay, good, let's get it over with. They don't have anything to live for, and they've been made that way by the Democratic Party. That's what they do. In exchange for their votes, they've been put in this eternal prison of being dependent on other people. And so now these rich kids, because look, all these college students that are supporting Bernie Sanders, and these kids at the social justice weenies in the video, they're going to the University of New Hampshire. These are really, really rich kids. One of the greatest questions in there, he asked this overweight man-child. He says, well, I think he said, so which 70-year-old socialist Jew are you going to vote for? And everybody says Bernie Sanders. And he goes up to this one guy and he says, well, Bernie Sanders said he's going to break up the banks. And this kid says, good, I think they should break up the banks. And Triumph says, well, then how are you going to get a hold of your dad's money? Bingo. They want a free education, and they want a free education because they want a free everything. They don't work, they don't drive, they don't do anything. They make perfect. They do. I take it back. They vote. Some of them do. Otherwise, it's the only thing they're allowed to compete in is who can be the biggest victim. So, yeah, it's pretty damn terrifying. But they don't seem to enjoy anything, Kevin. I mean, look, there's obviously progressives who are relatively happy, but you don't become a progressive unless you're miserable, right? I mean, it really is kind of the truth, though, right? I mean, if you really think about it, if you're a person who's trying to conserve things the way they are or were versus somebody who's trying to change everything, which one do you think is happier? If you're a happy person, you want things to stay the same. If you're an unhappy person, you want things to change. It's really pretty simple now that I think about it, right? Conservatives have to be happier than progressives because they want things to stay the same. Life is good, and it used to be better, but we want to hold on to this happiness. Progressives are miserable people who want to change, and keep tweaking the dials until they get what they want. And what they want is all of the money that people that work hard and all of the power. That's the difference between us and them. We don't care. Because we're self-sufficient and because we're self-reliant and because we have codes of honor and because we're masters of our own destiny, we don't care what other people do. I don't care. I've been to billionaires' houses and I've seen unbelievable wealth, and not only do I not resent them for it, I just don't care. In most cases, it's like this is more than I could use. I'd probably have 30 airplanes, but it's like, okay. I mean, this house is too big. It's too big to be comfortable. But I don't care how rich somebody else is, because I know that that wealth was created by that person's work and the work of the people that work with them, and it doesn't affect me. It doesn't make me poorer to be in the company of rich people, and it doesn't make me want to take their stuff. To the degree that I'd like something, it makes me want to work harder, and that's a nice motivation. But ultimately they're hopeless. They're hopeless, and they know their limitations. Or they're not smart enough, but most likely, certainly in the case of these social justice weenies, they're just too lazy. They're just too lazy. They don't want to work. They don't have the attention span. They don't have the motivation. Why should they work? They've been given participant trophies. They'll just be participants. Why would they have the attention span to become a brain surgeon? Most of them. There's a great poster that I saw that I liked a lot. Somebody's AT at 608 said there are also people who cannot work, with 7 exclamation points. Listen, we're not talking about handicapped people, needless to say. We're not talking about people who are genuinely unable to work. Everybody that I've ever met understands that there are people, for whatever reason, are incapable of working, and these people need our help and support, and that's what civilized society is. We're obviously not talking about them. We're talking about people who can work and don't, and that's the huge majority of them. That's the huge majority. It's ridiculous to say, what about people who can't work? Obviously, we're not talking about them. Most of the people we're talking about are people who are just these millennials especially, they just seem so, it's not even laziness. It's the second something, and look, it's clear, it's how they're raised, it's their environment, it's got to do with the internet. The second something gets boring, they just click off to something else, because there's billions of choices. In the time it takes for you to watch 1 2-minute video, there's probably 20,000 videos that have been added to the YouTube thing. So since there's always so many choices, and the choices are instantaneous, then if the movie gets a little slow, we're going to click out of there. If you've been given an opportunity, even on a silver platter, it's been handed to you on a silver platter. Yeah, okay, well maybe I'll do it, but they didn't earn it. They didn't earn it, but it's given to them. And then it gets a little difficult. I got a little bored, and then bam. I'm terrified of the future. I really am. I know, and I said it earlier, I'll say it again. There are, needless to say, and in fact, I've been talking with Charlie Kirk, and he thinks something like 40% of college campuses are conservative. It's really growing, because if people are sick of it, I hope he's right. We're going to find out. But, with that said, it's not even a question of who's going to invent the new stuff, who's going to maintain it. I remember what I was going to say. There's a great cartoon out there. I think I'm going to post it if I haven't already. And it's basically, it's a 3-panel thing. But look, I can just tell it to you. Women on campus are saying we need to get, the feminists saying, we need to get more women into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We need to get more women into STEM. And so there's this guy who's got a booth that says STEM studies, and then there's a woman's booth that says women's studies. And everybody's saying we need to get everybody to STEM, these feminists. And so they all go to women's studies, and they hold up signs that say more women in STEM, because it's easier to say we should have more women engineers than it is to go out and be an engineer. You see how easy it is? It's easier to signal your virtue and get up there and look noble and say we need to get more people we need more women in the sciences and more women in engineering. Well, that may be true, but why aren't you in science and engineering, Miss Radical Feminist? Because it's harder than women's studies is, right? That's just cut right to it. Math degree, a science degree, especially an engineering degree, is much, much, much harder than a women's studies degree, which is essentially just a 4-year vacation from reality, and 6 if you can get your master's, and 8 if you can make a PhD out of it. So, it's cartoon studies or, whatever. Okay. I've taken science courses, and I've taken what we used to call rocks for jocks, these kind of just, the impact of anime on society. It's 3 credits. It counts for humanities, but you major in that kind of thing, I'll tell you what. So anyway, they don't seem to have much fun. And I think actually that's a great thought that I had kind of on the fly. That's why I love doing the show. If they were nice people and if they were happy people, they wouldn't be progressives, right? They wouldn't be demanding change all the time until they get the free stuff. And then they'll keep taking until they're put the people who produce things in camps, which is what they always do. That's where it always ends up. And that's why this time these makers are heavily armed. Let's see. Somewhat along this topic, I can dispatch of this easily. Michael Northcott wants to know who's more likely to become America's Hitler, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, or some yet undiscovered future candidate who will rise up after the next worldwide financial crisis. Well, look, Bernie Sanders is more likely to become a Nazi Hitler than Donald Trump is, because even though Donald Trump is a very confident kind of, charismatic kind of guy, he's basically a businessman, and basically the businessman philosophy, at least on Donald Trump level, if you can get a little help from the government, great, but basically, go out there and make some money and so on. Bernie Sanders' entire philosophy is based on collectivism, and Hitler was a collectivist, and Stalin was a collectivist, and Mao was a collectivist. They always want to split hairs. Well, Hitler wasn't a socialist. Okay. As a matter of fact, the future that Bernie wants for America is much more like Nazism than communism, because in communism there is no private property. What Bernie wants is the government to control private property, which is National Socialism. And when Bernie talks about bringing socialism to America, I'm so tempted to do this. You mean kind of like a national socialism, kind of an American, like a socialism for the whole country, like a national socialism? And watch all these students go, yeah, and then imagine their surprise. But look, Bernie Sanders isn't going to become Hitler. And it's not just because the American people haven't suffered the humiliations that the Germans did. The American people are much more tolerant than the Germans ever were, because we're composed of so many different people. But much more importantly, and this just needs to be said, Bernie Sanders is not going to become America's Hitler, because Bernie Sanders isn't Hitler. Bernie Sanders, as I say, I don't think he's a particularly nice guy. He doesn't seem to have a good reputation with his staff. But Bernie Sanders is not a man who's just possessed with hatred and evil. I mean, he wants to redistribute the wealth. He's never had a job in his life. But this isn't a kind of guy who wrote a book when he was 25 about, exterminating people. He's just, he's not nearly that psychopathic. And you have to have a whole bunch of psychopaths. The Democrats are not Nazis. They're heading for National Socialism, but they're not Nazis in the way that we understand the word. It's a much, much better thing to think of them as the mafia. It's a giant racket, as Dinesh D'Souza said in Stealing America. It's like, if you're going to be a thief, what's the most valuable thing in the world? Turns out the most valuable thing in the world is the private property held by the American people. It's $71 trillion. That's rather a large heist. And so that's really what they are. They're about stealing. They're not about extermination. Now downstream, of course, once you vote these people into power and once you stop the idea of individualism, I'm going to go do some more colleges. I'm going to set up a bunch of questions. They're not going to sound like trick questions, but I want to get them on record. And one of them is, do you think that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? I know it's a Star Trek quote, but I'm going to ask him. Should we always do what more people want? And if they're socialists, they'll say yes. Because I'll set it up. Say, well, what about these guys? They're these billionaires. They don't have a voice. No, you're just saying they're outnumbered, they're outvoted. You're going to just take their stuff by force because you've got more votes than they do? Yep. Well, if that's the world we're going to live in, then what happens if somebody says that they don't particularly like the Jews and we want to take all their stuff? What's going to protect them? Or we don't particularly like students who come from the University of New Hampshire. Let's say that the Republicans have an armed revolution with all of our guns, and we set up a government and we say, hey, you social justice weenies, we don't want you around anymore. And we outvote you, so off you go. Then you say, what would protect you? And the answer is your civil rights would protect you. But if you're going to be talking about taking people's money and stealing it, then what civil rights do you have? In other words, if you have the right to take something from somebody punitively, the guy's got $1 billion, we're going to take it and give it to somebody else by force through the state. Then what's to stop the state from doing anything else? Does this guy have rights? Yes or no? Does he have a force field around him or her that protects not just their property but their rights, their freedoms, and everything? Do they have that force field around them? Yes or no? Because if it comes down to vote, what's that old line? Democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. These are the kind of things that these people never hear, and that's what causes them to grind their gears. They really are, on some level, they're just like Bambi. They're just so... You can even make the case they're just really innocent. They just don't know any better. Their teachers have led them on this kind of thing. Okay. Let's see here. I can probably do this one pretty quick, too. Zachariah Timmons again. Is there such a thing as an authoritarian right or a libertarian left? Why have these terms become popular? Yes, there is such a thing as an authoritarian right. I don't think there's such a thing as a libertarian left. Modern leftism is collectivism. It's collectivism. It's redistributing wealth. It's big, powerful state. It's single-payer health care. It's government intrusion into everything. Ever more government, ever more state, ever more regulations, ever more taxes. You can't be a progressive and be a libertarian at the same time. Progressivism is about taking away people's freedom and their money and distributing it to other people. You cannot possibly be a leftist libertarian, or a progressive libertarian anyway, because those two terms are actually genuinely antithetical to each other. But you can have an authoritarian right. I mean, you can have a world where conservatives try to enforce their values on people legislatively, and you could make the case that that's what happened with gay marriage. I'm not going to open up this entire can of worms, but to put it quickly, this philosophy of modern conservatism that I've become a part of and that I believe in is coherent and consistent. And if we're saying that the government needs to get out of people's private lives, then the government needs to get out of their private lives. And that means I don't care. It doesn't affect me. It may offend me, and I may think that it's bad for society. And a lot of people make the case that it is, in fact, the end of society in terms of its structure. And I think those people have got a pretty good point. But it's not the government's job to legislate it. That's a fight that has to be fought in the culture. It needs to be fought in the culture. So, but you can obviously imagine a world where every now and then, you just don't see much of it. I'm trying to think of an example of this kind of authoritarian conservatism, right-wing stuff, and I just can't really think of anything. You get into like the moral majority. That was 20, 30 years ago. And even those people were not really saying we want to do this by force. So generally speaking, I don't think you can be a progressive and a libertarian. I think those terms are antithetical. You can be a conservative who's so rigid, but then they're not really conservative by the definition that I have of conservative. So anyway, that was just a kind of a fun little thing. I don't want to spend any more time on that. 2 to go. Michael Northcott says, what's a less morally objectionable and unrealistic way to reform the electoral system? Making it so that only property owners can vote, or adopting the original form of democracy where offices were assigned by lot? It's called sortition. The argument for only being able to vote if you have property actually is a very good argument. I don't support it, but it's a good argument. And the argument is that if you only allowed people with property to vote, then they would not be inclined or need to vote themselves money out of the treasury. In other words, if you had property, you were established, you were somewhat successful, and if you wanted to raise taxes, the taxes would be raised on you. And if you wanted to put in an income tax, it would be an income tax on you. And if you wanted to soak the rich and do all these things to destroy individual freedom, the persons that would be suffering would be you. By eliminating that and making sure that everybody has one vote, one person, one vote, which is not something the Democrats believe in. The Democrats vote 6, 7 times, and they're proud of it. But one person, one vote, you can reach a point, and de Tocqueville warned about this 250 years ago. There comes a point when people can vote themselves money out of the Treasury, and we're at that point and past it. So that would be the argument for property holders, but I can't buy that argument. I mean, my rights are my rights, and my right to vote is part of my natural law right to be governed with my consent, and it shouldn't be predicated on anything. There's no predication on my right to free speech. There's no predication on my right to bear arms. There's no predication on any of that. So needless to say, this idea of having to be a landowner in order to vote, I don't agree with. But the problem needs to be addressed. The problem of people voting themselves other people's money needs to be addressed. One way you address it is by following the Constitution, but that's been long gone because the Constitution says, promote the general welfare. That is a clause I would like to have seen taken, just never written. But the definition of general welfare is something that benefits everybody. The interstate highway system benefits everybody. That's what the federal government's supposed to do. Taking money from you to give it to me is not general welfare. That's my welfare. And as I've said before, by the way, that's why they named the giant redistribution scheme, why they called it welfare. That's why they gave it the name welfare. Are you on welfare? Yes. Why? Because it says right here in the Constitution, promote the welfare. They just play these kind of tricks all the time. So what do you do about this? I don't think you can do anything. You can't deprive people of their right to vote. It's natural law. It's a God-given law that they're born with. It's a right that they're born with. You can't take it away from them. You can do. Here's what you can do, and we better do it quick. You can flat tax them, or you can sales tax them, and that way, everybody's got the same skin in the game. And I'm not going to get into flat tax or fair tax or sales tax or anything, but if everybody paid the same tax, and I mean everybody paid the same tax, then everybody would have skin in the game and everybody would have a vote. And furthermore, and this isn't mentioned very often, if the government was to make all of its money off of a sales tax, the federal government, then the government would be, in fact, motivated to get out of the way of business, because the more business that happens, the more money the federal government has. And the less business that happens, the less money the federal government has. If you had a sales tax as a means of funding this government, then everybody'd be paying the same. If we wanted to raise the taxes, they'd be raised on everybody. And everybody has skin in the game. And the government has skin in the game, too. The government revenues are coming from sales. The more economy there is, the more economic activity there is, the more money the government gets to do their little things with, like shut down economies. So, yeah, there is a solution, but the solution is not the requirement to hold property. And then the other thing about, selection, random selection of people. I think I speak for just about everybody in this country when I say at this point, if you want to just randomly run the phone book, as William F. Buckley famously said, he'd rather be governed by the first 475 people in the Boston phone book than the clowns we have now. But that's only because the system is really so badly broken. If you were electing people and they did the way it was supposed to, businessman goes to Washington, he's got a problem. He's trying to fix a problem. Maybe the sidewalk in his neighborhood is not good, or whatever. He goes to Washington, he does 2 years or 6 or whatever, and then he goes home because he's obsolete now. His experience is obsolete. Then you would actually get good people, and then the whole system would be working. But again, it's kind of the same kind of people that are drawn to socialism are drawn to government work and politics, right? The vast invisible bureaucracy. And then there's also immortal bureaucracy. And then there's politicians who want to get in for life because it's life work. It's make millions of dollars. Harry Reid's made millions of dollars as a public servant. That somehow has happened. So has Hillary Clinton, made hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is for people who are not smart enough to go out and get your money the honest way by persuading you to part with it. Two to go. Dave Welcher says, I know that you're a great admirer of Elon Musk, and he's certainly doing great things, but a lot of his business dealings seem to be dependent upon the kind of crony capitalism that we conservatives decry. Can you square that circle? Not really. I can partially square it. You could make the case that, look, he's developing a launch system, and NASA is a customer. I mean, it's not like, let me think about this. He's taking NASA money to help him develop the. I'll get to Tesla, which I know a lot less about in a minute. People are like upset because he's getting money from NASA. It's like, well, he's a businessman. He should just use his own money. Why are we paying for Elon Musk, and why are we paying for SpaceX? But on some level, this is kind of like Boeing building a fighter for the Air Force. I mean, he is providing a service on some level. Certainly, given the state of the current U.S. space program, assuming we have that a national space program is something that the government should do, and I kind of think that is one of the few things that I think legitimately you can spend some money on. But we haven't had one for a long time. So if you're going to do it and you're going to take that money and use it to develop the private system with all of its competitive advantages and Blue Origin and Virgin and all that other stuff, then it's more almost like a prepayment or a cooperation rather than a government subsidy. Now, look, I know that sounds kind of sophistry, and it probably is. But where are we with this? I mean, Elon Musk right now is so far ahead of the field. He's sent resupply missions to the space station. He's landed rockets vertically. Other people have done some very impressive things, but no one's done everything that he's done. And he's got a Dragon capsule that's flown perfectly a couple times, and we need to get people back into space again. And Elon Musk and SpaceX are the only people that can do it now. So if they are going to be servicing the space station, which is owned by the U.S. government, we put almost all of it up there, but they allow us to put some Americans up there every now and then. The Russians do. But if Elon Musk and SpaceX are going to be servicing the space station, then NASA is a client. It's not like, here, take this money and take some more money and take some more money. It's like, take some of this money. He's put a lot of his own money in there. Build us something that'll get us up there, and then we're in business. As far as Tesla goes, I know almost nothing about Tesla, but I suppose it's the same thing. I know that people who have Teslas love them, and that they're that they may in fact make a market for an electric car. But if he's just taking government money for it, no, you really can't square it. It is crony capitalism. And the fact that it's crony capitalism for a cause I certainly think is just doesn't make it good. So I don't want to come off defending something here. I mean, on some level, the charges are exactly right and fair. He is taking government money, and we don't like government support. Should be able to do it on his own. But again, he is developing something in cooperation with his client. It's going to be his primary client, and it's not quite the same as paying people like for example, Solyndra. $500 million goes into Solyndra so that they can start making solar panels so that President Obama can have his political donut. But the federal government and the American people would not have gotten anything back from Solyndra. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The Solyndra thing, the bailout of Solyndra, the American people didn't get anything out of that. Even if Solyndra had succeeded, they wouldn't really have gotten anything out of it. We have a space program, a federal space program, and I think it's worthwhile. I think we will soon, NASA will just disappear like an appendix, just become basically an administration. And right now, if you talk to guys in private space, while there's still some things that NASA does well, they'll tell you that NASA's main job, at least until very recently, was to keep people from getting into space, with all these regulations and all of this nonsense. But, I mean, it's a fair question, Dave. I don't like it. And the fact that I like him and I like what he's doing doesn't mean it's not a contradiction. But it is what it is, right? I mean, does it lessen my respect for him? Here's, I guess, the final answer. Here's my final answer. he says he's going to go to Mars in a decade, and he's going to do it with his technology and with his rockets, and undoubtedly with some government assistance. So since I'd like humans to go to Mars, and since Elon Musk seems to be the only person with a vision to do it, he is kind of in a unique position of the kind of cooperation with the government that Boeing has, and all the contractors for the Apollo program had, Grumman and North American Rockwell and all these guys. They were taking government money to put men on the moon, and I thought going to the moon was a good idea. If Elon Musk needs to get these government subsidies in order to make space commercially available, then I don't think that's so much of an ends justifies the means kind of thing, which I've never bought into, so much as it's kind of a, priming a pump for to start an industry that is hopefully going to take over. You can't have private space if no one can get into space privately. And what he's done is nothing short of miraculous, and what these other guys are doing is nothing short of miraculous. And by the way, that's kind of what NASA was originally doing, right? I mean, it was originally NACA, the National something Council on Aeronautics, National Advisory Council on Aeronautics, I think, before NASA. It was NACA. And NACA did a lot of fundamental research, and one of the things they did was they just tested airfoils. So every single airfoil, the airfoil on my Long Easy, the airfoil on virtually every plane that flies is it's a NACA number. It's a 6209 airfoil, and this kind of fundamental research I think is an appropriate thing for a government to do. It's not terribly expensive, and I think NASA will eventually will get to that place where they're more of a regulatory agency than anything, and frankly, I like to think that wouldn't be very long-term, because once you get out there, what do you need regulatory agencies for, right? That's the nice thing about space. Space is, you can't really pollute that environment, right? I mean, what are you going to do to space? You leave your nuclear rocket leaves a radioactive trail in a vacuum of trillions of square miles with no one around and filled with radiation anyway. So, yeah, I want to get us out there. And if this is what we have to do it, then it's what we have to do it. I'm not defending him, and I'm not going to say it's okay in this case, but it is a bit of a unique case, I think. Anyway, last one. This was lovely. Hey, Bill, you seem a little low on energy. Let me just cue someone up here. You seem a little low on energy in the past few Trifecta videos, so I'm not going to ask any questions, but just in case you need a little pep, here's something I did, and I hope it would put a smile on your face, and it certainly did. That put a big smile on my face. And that's from Gary K. And he says, have a great week. Gary from Israel. He said, if I heard anything about the new Stealth Eagle F-15s, Israel's getting a few, and I wonder if we got any intel on them. It's called the Stealth Eagle. It's a significant redesign of the F-15, and it's cost-effective, and I think I'm generally in favor of it. But that's a whole different issue. Anyway, this is an awesome picture. Thank you so much for drawing it, and I'd like to think that someday I can mount that AR-15 on the actual airplane, 2 of them, and that would make me very happy, having the Long Easy with a couple machine guns, and actually spent some more thought than I should probably own up to on how you could custom make your own air-to-air and air-ground missiles using GoPro cameras and iPads. But I want to get to the heart of the question here. I think what you're picking up, well, first of all, we shoot Trifecta in the morning, and usually I just get up and I start scanning the news services and find out what the latest abomination is, and a lot of times I haven't had a chance to even process it. I've come out of these kind of nightmares I was telling you about. First thing I do is wake up and check this stuff. It's like, oh, for God's sake, are you kidding me? And then, next thing you know, I'm in the car, next thing you know, I'm in the studio. But as I said earlier, it's really starting to affect me a little bit. I'm kind of getting the threats are so great, and the resources are getting very stressed, and everywhere I look, I see real problems, major threats, historical threats. This whole thing about the amygdala response, I'm not going to get into the 2 letters, so nobody gets a drink today. But this idea that the amygdala in your brain is the progressive call it your fear center, but it's actually not. it's the center of your brain that triggers the fear center. And what the amygdala does is it's the threat recognition center. And the classic example is if you are walking down, I've said this 100 times, but this is the kind of point I want to make. If you're walking down a trail and you hear a snap of a twig and a rustle of grass, and the next thing you know, there's a leopard on your back. If you survive the encounter, the next time you're walking down the trail, if you hear the snap of a twig and the rustle of grass, you will not have to go, where did I hear that before? You will automatically know that something bad is going to happen. You're going to turn around, shout, scream, run, whatever you have to do. So this is the ability to recognize threats and activate adrenaline, fight or flight. It's not just fear. It can often be courage. It can be, whatever. And I process so much information and I see so much of it and I'm so deep in it that I am seeing real threats everywhere. And I've never been worried about the threats, but some of this new Russian hardware is very good. Their new subs are good. Their Su-37 is maybe better. It's certainly better than the F-35. I say it's far better than the F-18. It might be better than the F-22. I feel like we're losing our military edge rapidly. I feel like the Russians and the Chinese are coming up to our standards rapidly. This ISIL thing and ISIS doesn't particularly concern me overseas, but they're here and they're going to appear. And part of me is saying these guys are going to be in for a bit of a big surprise here. But they're here, and that's going to have to be dealt with. The debt is out of control. The debt is the world economic system is just a giant game of people coming to the office every day and saying, "We still going to agree on this? Yeah, okay, we'll get another day out of it." That's catastrophic failure mode, loss of crew and vehicle kind of failure up ahead of us. And look, this country's always faced problems, and I used to think that things like Nazism and communism were much bigger problems. I think I still think those were bigger problems, but the thing that really this is my theme for the night. The thing that worries me the most is again, with the exceptions, we have millennials out there who are in the armed forces now, and these are the most deadly and lethal soldiers we've ever fielded. So once again, I'm talking about the social justice weenies, and this is to some degree the tip of the iceberg that's making the most noise. But even with that said, just in terms of the bell curve of ability, we have these incredible threats facing us, and I do not have a lot of confidence in the upcoming generation's ability to deal with them. And furthermore, there doesn't seem to be anything that is actual genuine progress in terms of what I saw as progress growing up. We were going into space. We're going to, we're two people. We're flying one person, then two people, then three people. Then we go to the moon. We go to space station. The future was good, and the future was exciting, and the future was endless possibilities. And now the future is just, like I say, just sitting around thatch huts, burning cow patties and pulling parasites off each other, and eating our sustainable algae cakes, and raising money for the Guatemalan water snake. There's no vision for the country. Bernie says a future we can believe in, which is what? The nursery. He's selling a nursery to infants. It's not a future. And where do you go, right? I mean, this is the first time in history, really, in human history, where people who would take opportunity and freedom above security and dependence, they had some place to go. But we don't have any place to go now. I mean, there's no place on the planet that's unoccupied. And I used to think it was space, but space is a long way downstream in terms of achievability, and I don't know that we're going to get there. It's telling on me, and I just decided I was going to do 2016 as hard as I could. And then on the day after Inauguration Day, I want to get these movies started, because working with people is so much more fun than this, and it's so much more effective and stuff. And but we still have 9 months to get into this thing, and I think I think whatever you think of Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, I understand that this is good to the degree that the establishment is just completely going to come apart one way or another. But couldn't we do better than those two? And J.J. O'Connell says America's going to return. It's coming, and you have to believe. JT, sorry. JT, you're right. If I didn't fundamentally believe it, if I didn't believe we could stop it and save it, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be going through it. If I didn't actually believe it, then I would just, like I said, I'd just go someplace where I didn't have to worry about it and live out the rest of my life, and who cares? Who cares what happens in the future? I don't feel an obligation to the children of this country. I feel an obligation to the ancestors of this country who have sacrificed so much. You just go see The Revenant, by the way. Just go watch The Revenant and just get a sense of what people had to do to make this country happen. Tim Moore says, who wants to set up a colony on Antarctica with Bill? It's funny. If you were going to go someplace to get away from all of these takers, I've given this some thought. One of the things that it would have to be, I think, is it would have to be a place that's really distant and a place that's really cold. It'd have to be a place that'd be very, very hard to get to and cold. The reason I say cold is because cold is natural selection against stupidity and selfishness. You can't be selfish and stupid in a cold environment. You can be one or the other. And that kind of cold selects out against both of them. Those kind of conditions select for intelligence, discipline, planning, and cooperation, voluntary cooperation. There's something about, look, I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. This is my country. I'm going to stay here and defend it. But this business of like Honduras or something, every time I think about, setting up a republic in a jungle someplace, it's just got that Jonestown stink to it. I'm not gonna move the flag to a jungle, and I'm not going to move it someplace. It's the last resort. But as a last resort, I think probably Alaska. One of the things I was thinking about, and we'll wrap it up here, is you could do this completely legally. It would take a major effort, but you could do it absolutely legally. And there was some talk about this with New Hampshire a couple years ago. You could make a nationwide appeal, basically, for those of us who've had enough of this, to move to one state or maybe 2 or 3 adjoining states. Literally put out a call to people saying, listen, let's say Bernie gets elected, and you basically say, listen, if you're one of those people that likes to make things, move to Idaho and Wyoming and maybe someplace a little warmer, but move to this state or these few states, because if you moved a bunch of if you moved 100, 200,000 politically motivated conservatives, and when I say politically motivated, all I mean is willing to get up and vote to be left alone, then you could turn that state completely. You could own the legislature of that state, and you could own the governorship. And once you had the legal levers of an actual state, let's just take Idaho, which I like very much. Let's just say that we made a call, and we're so sick as a nation that the makers, the conservatives in the country, basically said, enough of this socialism. Everybody says Texas. Texas is too hot for me. Texas will be fine. But just stay with Idaho for the moment, because Texas isn't in any danger right this second, although it's getting bluer. You could just move to Idaho and get out the vote and put enough people there, and you'd have the Idaho legislature, and you'd have the Idaho governorship, and then you would have the legal and constitutional power of the state to start talking about the 10th Amendment. And it's one thing for people to protest, but it's another thing if a state really, really put their heels down. If you had a governor and a legislature and, of course, the population to back you up, that really, really wanted to put your heels down on this and just say this is unconstitutional. We are not going to accept it. We are not going to accept it. We're not going to accept this tax rate because it says here in the Constitution that we're all a part of it. We're just not going to do it. Come and arrest us all. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? And that's actually achievable. And it's not armed militias coming down and taking things. And as somebody pointed out, Cynthia, sorry, it's hard for me to see, Syndril 97 is not going galt. On the contrary, it's saying, look, let's all go to Idaho, and let's just, even though Idaho is part of the United States, obviously it's probably a Freudian slip, and even though we have to pay all these federal taxes and stuff, let's make sure there's no income tax here, and let's just take this one state and let's just pull all of this industry into the state and make all of this money and be conservatives, and this would be the place to go for innovation. Cut the regulations, the state regulations, down as much as you possibly can. Plus, it's just beautiful, by the way. It's just gorgeous. And everybody with ambition. It's so just picking Idaho as an example. Idaho would be the new America, and you probably could move millions of people there. And then you could basically, at that point, you could make a stand. You could just sue the federal government in the Supreme Court. That's one of the things I liked about Ted Cruz. He sued the federal government on behalf of Texas at the Supreme Court, and he won. Eclipse 2017 says, can we take California? California would be the jewel. If you could take one state, California would be the one. I mean, California is just, in terms of its agricultural and its cities and its, and the climate is just unparalleled. California would be the place to take. Now, the bad news is that California is obviously probably the most liberal state in the nation. It's one of the top 3 or 4. The good news is it wouldn't take but 10 or 15 people with AR-15s to conquer all of California. You wouldn't even have to fire. You just walk around with them slung over your shoulder, and they just bow down at your feet. So something to think about. But I'm talking about legally, completely legally. It's just, the progressives in those states wouldn't like it very much. But my response to that would be, well, welcome to our world. Welcome to our world. If you had Boise is as liberal as any other big city now. But if you put enough people in there to be able to outvote Boise or flip Boise, then the progressives would say, how dare you come in here and destroy our values? It's like, hey, sweetheart, we're just doing to you what you did to this entire country. Tough. If you don't like it, leave. We had to leave. One state would do it. It'd be interesting. And then if you could do it, for 2 or 3 of these low population states, and they're mostly conservative anyway. It's not like you have to flip, Oregon. You could just get 2 or 3 of these governors together and say, all right, now we are going to say, we 3 states are not going to obey this. Come and get us, because we have a National Guard. Is Bernie Sanders going to launch a civil war? No. The Americans going to stand for watching the federal government go into entire states and, arrest governors because they're saying the Constitution, here's the clause. So there you go. That's just a thought. The kind of things that give me a little peace of mind sometimes. But yeah, it's a lot going on there, man, and a lot more. Tim Morris, USA says Burt Rutanistan. I talked about this in the summer. I had not met Dick Rutan at that point. Dick was going to move to Oregon, and Burt wanted him to move to Idaho. And he said, write Dick a letter, see if you can convince him. I actually offered. I said, you want me to have a word with him, Burt? I'd never met him before. I flew with him once, but he never would have remembered me. And he said, yeah, you want to? And I sent this letter. It was hilarious. And I basically said, we need commander for the Republic of Northern Idaho Air Force. And that Air Force is going to consist of whatever fighter jets we can salvage and weaponized Long-Easies. Lots of them. So there you go. Another sip from my fabulous Stratosphere Lounge cup. All right, gangaroos. It's almost 2 hours, a little less than. But those were great questions and really a lot of fun. I think that's going to do it for the night. And boy, I've got a lot to do. Firewalls are back. They're coming back. We will have one in the second half of February, and the first one's going to be on the destruction of inner cities by decades of democratic policies. So that's exciting, and I'm just trying to sit on my hands and not oversell all this stuff because it's a terrible habit I have. Things take longer than I always think. I don't know why that's true. You'd think I would have learned that 30 years ago, but I just wasn't smart enough, I guess. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and thanks for the support on Facebook. Especially thanks for the emotional support I get in the comment sections and on the Facebook page. And I just can't ever close one of these shows without thanking our paying members. And those of you that are paying members are going to be in for a real pleasant surprise, I think, in the next 4, 5, 6 days. And those of you that aren't, we can maybe make it a little more interesting for you. So We'll talk about that next time, I hope. I do have to tell you, it's beautiful. This web design is just beautiful. It's really going to blow your mind. So anyway, that'll do it for 113. That's amazing, really, when you think about it. So thanks for being a part of the team. And Stratolaunchers are just my favorite people of my favorite people. And I guess we'll see you next time. Take care now.